Hey guys, what's going on? Shah here, and today we are taking a look at 21 Streets. This was a highly requested video in my Discord. I honestly couldn't get a good run going. Every time we went into a 21, 2, 3, we would just brick somewhere in the key, whether it was from a bug or whether it's from like a missed kicks, missed stuns, bad CD timings. So we finally got one. This has been after the changes as well. I'll probably talk about some of the changes throughout the video, certain packs that have changed, things that have gotten easier. This dungeon is a little bit easier. I would say the changes are definitely noticeable, especially if you were running Streets before the nerfs. After the nerfs, you won't notice it because obviously you haven't ran it, but they reduced the mobs in the dungeon by about 20%, and on top of that, they have reduced the percent you need by about 10. I was like cross comparing some routes, and my old route had like, when I looked at the new route compared to the old route, it was about a 10%, 10 or 11% over. So much easier, since you now have to do like 1 or 2 less trash pulls, plus the way that like towards the end of the dungeon and even at the start, a lot of the groups are very like compact. So it was very easy to accidentally pull extra mobs. And on a week like this with bolstering, it would have been kind of impossible to do. So I think we ended up having only 1 death, and yeah, it was a pretty clean run finally. I actually recorded this yesterday over a run that we did after like doing 4 of these in a row, and we had like 9 deaths or 10 deaths. It was very messy. I liked the route better in that video, but this is a slightly different iteration, so let's just jump in. So our comp is something that you guys have been seeing me run in some other comps. This is some different players though. We have Fury Warrior, we have Frost Mage, we have a Destro Warlock this time around, and we have a Holy Priest. The Holy Priest is just a pug. They weren't in Discord. We just kind of carried them along because we kind of felt confident in our route, and everyone in the group knew what we were doing, so we just kind of went in. Popping Incarn on pull for this first group, it's going to give me an extra about 12 seconds of Incarn, and then I'm going to hold my actual Incarn for the next pull. So this pack hurts a lot. It's mostly this Radiant Pulse cast from the Gate Warden. The healer just needs to be ready for it. The tank, you don't really need to use a personal here, but it's always good to help mitigate some of that damage so the healer can focus on other people in the group. The other big thing here is like the proxy strike. So honestly, you just want to really be focusing on the Gate Warden and making sure you are mitigating all the damage that he puts out, because the tank does take a good bit of damage here, but there's also a good bit of group damage. There's no windows for you to off heal here though, so you just have to be kind of careful. Just focus on yourself. I think I only popped that there. I didn't use survival. I didn't use any trinkets. This next pull then, we are going to pull left and right side. It's 2 officers, 2 specialists, or 1 officer, 2 specialists. And then we're going to focus Ur is mostly going to be the play in this key. There is 2 times we kill Woe, and the reason for Woe is just to either skip around or have like increased movement speed, because you do have to travel a fair bit in this key. The big thing you want to focus on kick wise is going to be the hard light barrier, I think is what the cast is called. If that gets off, it's basically damage reflection, and I've seen a lot of DPS just go from 100 to 0 within seconds if they're bursting with it. So you either want to kick it, or I think it's purgeable. So yeah, this hard light barrier here, we get the fear on it. Most CCs work in here, so if you have things like fear, roar, blind, disorients, those will all stop the cast and prevent the cast from being casted again, because as soon as the cast starts, it's put on an internal cooldown by the mob, and they won't start recasting until the timer is available again. We are then going to LOS on green here, and this is so we can double pull and get these mobs stacked. There are a lot of casters, and when you're running a comp that doesn't have a ton of kicks, or as many as like if you're running like a full melee comp or something, or a shaman, like a resto shaman, it's really hard to move these mobs back. And then we're going to commit lust to this pull. So the Overseer is probably going to be the priority. The hard light barrier needs to be kicked, and then if you can interrupt spark burns, that's always a great idea. And then the stasis beams. Stasis beams are essentially like drained fluids from Necrotic Wake, just a channeled stun that does damage over time. Just make sure you kick it so you have all of your party members available. The overlap with the stasis beam and then these actual like rotating beams can be pretty deadly, especially if someone's close. So we have our range out baiting to make sure that they're not in melee. There is a chance it still goes in melee though. If that's the case, you just want to slowly move mobs away, or the melee can kind of dance around the beam, because again, like I said, the mobs are extremely difficult to move. So the next pull, same thing here. You want to focus on kicking Hardlight Barrier and the Stasis Beam, and then we're going to target the Woe Relic. Sorry, the Relic. I was targeting Woe there. So the here is really interesting. So Stasis Beam goes off. That's the stun that you see here. It went off for the full duration. Not great, but it's kind of whatever. In hierarchies, you can't let that happen. If you wait to kill you actually can chain the death of into the next mob, because the next mob will cast the like Radiant Pulse immediately, which does pretty big group damage. And if you chain with the buff, it will allow you to like use the buff to heal up that first Radiant Pulse. Problem with this week though in particular is the bolstering affix. So I didn't want to chain there immediately because of that. And then the Empowered Glyph of Restraint needs to be kicked immediately. It's a very, very fast cast. I recommend you have one assigned player always kick it. As a tank, if you're pugging, I just recommend you hold your kick for that. So it's every like 20 seconds or so. Just, again, what it does is it basically applies a group slow to your entire party. It's about 50% slow, makes it harder to dodge the Rift Blasts. And on top of that, it puts out a really nasty dot. If you're running with a Priest, though, Mass Dispel is really good there. But alternatively, just don't miss the kick. That giant beam that comes out from where the boss spawns, it doesn't do damage, so feel free to stand in it. A lot of people like to avoid it, but you don't have to. So Zo'phex is... I'm going to eventually do a boss guide on this video, but ideally you will make sure you are baiting his rotary body armor away from the group. So where it spawns... it doesn't spawn on pull, it spawns about, I want to say 30 seconds in, wherever the tank is facing. This is more or less annoying for the range, for the casters in your group. So the idea here as a tank is you want to create like a range camp, which is going to be basically underneath the boss, and then you want to rotate the boss around in circles around the group. Again, if everyone just stacks underneath the boss, you can also just avoid the shield altogether. So there's those two different strategies. And then interrogation just needs to get out. As soon as the containment cell pops up, swap to it, or in this situation, we just ice blocked it off. So the blades get a little ridiculous here. I don't do a great job. This isn't my cleanest attempt at this boss. But you essentially... I'm trying to get him back into a position where there are no blades and we don't have to worry about it. I did move away from the warriors... Kyrian Bastion Spear thingy, which is no bueno. Definitely don't want to do that. But ideally you just want, so the ranger are going to start moving into like right here, and I'm going to just keep making circles around. So that's ideally our strat. Again, interrogation can just run out. There are some classes that can immune it. So things like, I don't think it's Death Advance, but I think like Icebound Fortitude from a DK can immune it. I think if you're in your Bladestorm window as a warrior, you can avoid it. There's some like kind of cool tricks to do that. Ice Block of course works, Bubble works. So if you can avoid the downtime of the interrogation, I recommend doing it, but it's not like the biggest loss as long as you can quickly swap to the containment cell. Containment cells though don't have like a lot of health, so it's honestly not too big of a deal. Just run over to it, get a couple thrashes, or insert spell ability here, and it should go down pretty quickly. So our mage blinks far, and I think we break her out pretty quickly. Yeah, it's like one Chaos Bolt, just pumps it. Oh, I guess the warrior was on it too. And that's pretty much it. You just want to move the boss to where it's a kind of clear space. You can technically bait the arm security, which is what these blades are, by just having range move out as soon as the ability is about to go off, and then readjust. So I'm trying to get back down here, but then the boss does like, this boss has such a weird hitbox. It reminds me of like Captain Jolly from Freehold. Just like insanely small hitbox for how big the boss is. I mean, Jolly was small though, but his hitbox was like minuscule. It was crazy. So I typed out Woe here just for the priest know, but most of us were in Discord. So we're going to tag this left pack, line of sight once again right here on the edge, and just make sure we're kicking the Hyperlight Bolts, the Hardlight Barriers. I don't think there's a Stasis Beam in this pull. And then dodging these grenades. These grenades are lethal. Don't get hit by them. Mage Rips aggro, and then again, we're targeting Woe. I'm setting focus to it because the kick for Woe is 15 seconds. So one melee kick is typically enough to like handle that. And then you want Woe to die. It can die fairly quickly, but it doesn't have to die right away because you want as much time with Woe as possible. So everything dies here. We make sure dots are off of us. I'm running Pelagos, and I'm running Feral Conduits right now. So that's what I'm doing here, is I am running out, and what the rest of my group is doing is they are actually heading all the way to the Oasis. Sorry, my headphone fell out. They are heading all the way to the Oasis and to the Mailroom to unlock those portals and to start RP. This dungeon is like really annoying when it comes to that kind of stuff because you have to like wait a ton of time. So I'm trying to change to Mechanicos really quickly. So yeah, I was running the basically no conduits, and I noticed it on like the first or second trash pull when I saw the Pelagos like little manifestation spawn. And then on that fight, I was like using my empowered spirit with the warrior, and it wasn't giving me like cooldown reduction. I was like, that's really, really strange. And they've activated these portals by now, so I'm running back in and I'm going to the post. So what we're trying to do is we want to use hero on Mailroom. Now, what I don't like about this route is that we sit on hero for a bit. This is a dungeon where you have about a 9-minute window to get 4 lusts. If not, you have to only get 3. So this route's a little different. Normally what we would do is clear trash a little bit, go to Mailroom, then come back and do this pull. But I said whatever. I had Incarn up, we had CDs, and we still had 3 minutes on lust. So we're killing Woe Relic here as well. And then we're trying to blow up the rest of these mobs before Woe dies. I'm setting focus to it to make sure I'm going to get kicks on it. And then we're trying to get the rest of this pack down. They removed like 2 mobs from this pack, which made it a lot easier. There used to be like a strong arm in here, as well as something else. I don't remember exactly. But Woe dies right as these dudes die as well. And then we are doing this RP as fast as possible. Popping dash when you have Woe is really effective because they stack the movement speeds, which is super nice. I see the Warn Journal, so I am going to run right over to the texts. There are weak ores and add-ons for this like a little mini game, but I'm a nerd and I like spent time analyzing this fucking room. So I've memorized where all of these locations are. So we get Flute, which is in this corner, and then we pick up this Phial of Blood and we bring it to the Alchemist. And because we got Woe and because we're concealed, we don't aggro the mobs. And we're able to do it fast enough where we don't get any of the strong arms. So we're waiting around basically again for the password. I think the password was Crimson Knife for this run. It changes, of course. And then we all run in. Now, one thing I will note is that they probably fixed this bug by now because I haven't noticed it recently. But originally, if you were in combat with mobs and you tried running in here while you were still in combat, it would actually bug out this boss room and you wouldn't be able to interact with the weapons. Now, of course, they could have fixed that. If you know that they fixed that, let me know in the comment section below, and so other people can also reference that. I typically grab the guitar, DPS grab the 3 other instruments, and then the healers typically on drums. Again, I don't think it actually matters, but that's just how we've always done it ever since like last patch when it was just like a mythic dungeon. You want to make sure you hit all these notes. The notes for the guitar specifically will always spawn in the same, like they'll spawn from the location you slid to. So when you slide to a location, slid a word? I don't even know. When you slide to a location, just stand there and then turn around and it'll probably have you just slide right back. So just like a little helpful tip if you didn't know. This disruptive patron, you want to make sure you either stun them on their teleport, or you want to put down an Ursul's Vortex or like Kyrian Spear. I don't think anything else really negates knockbacks, but there I think we just ended up stunning it with Shadow Fury, and then you want to kick the Menacing Shout. That's pretty much it for the trash. It's really, really easy. Dodge the swirls. I think it scales with Fortified if I'm not mistaken. I might be wrong about that, but on Fortified weeks, we tend to die more often to those green swirls than on Tyrannical weeks. Now, so in this part of the fight, same thing, except now there's actually going to be rotten food getting thrown, so you just want to be careful on like right here. Like if you slid into that green poop, I keep saying that. I don't, if that might not even be a word. Just be careful. The tank won't die, but a DPS or something will. Watching swirls, we're stacking this stuff up. We're focusing the patron, and then we're also watching the Menacing Shout kick. And then teleport goes off. We have Kyrian Spear down. They teleport away. They get gripped instantly back in. Ursul's works the same way. You can also like Death Grip, obviously. Alternatively, again, you can stun too, just to keep them stacked up. Them teleporting away isn't like really annoying, but then you need to like run out, get a range kick, try to bring it back. It's just more efficient for things to be stacked permanently. Watch your feet, moving back and then hitting all these notes. These give like a haste and damage buff, so you want to make sure you're hitting them. They will also spawn when the boss is active. It's just a little different because it'll spawn like during his what's it, like suppression spark. So we're moonfiring, we're making sure we're moonfiring and then the boss, just to make sure that we have threat on those two. We're focusing down to get the CDR, and this boss is honestly like glorified trash. It reminds me of like a more enjoyable Shadow of Zool. Suppression start goes off. We're sitting in the middle of this because 1 second left, he's going to spawn these notes, and then we can slide out, maintain our damage buff and haste buff, and then we can also get out easier because it's sucking you in. So it's easier just to wait, get damage, and then slide out last second. The notes will spawn 1 second left of the timer, so you have to be very quick. If you don't hit the notes, it's fine. You can just hit your extra action button and slide out to avoid the damage. Bonus points though if you actually hit your notes. You're just dodging the crowd control frontal. It's kind of hard to see, but it's like, it's not like a V-shaped frontal. It's not like a 90-degree frontal. It's just like a straight up like in front of him. So just, you don't want to be between the shield. And then again, here we're waiting, we're sliding out with the notes, we're maintaining our buff, and then we're finishing it up. I missed the lockgate here. Lockgate was a good idea. Bellis did a great job of kind of planning that. Heroic leap goes up. You can actually Door of Shadows up this like a ledge here to prevent you from running around. It's a minuscule time save, but a time save nonetheless. And now that we have Lust up, we want to get to the Mailroom Boss as soon as possible. In my last route that I recorded of this key, and I think my original route, we actually clear Mailroom. We already would have Lust on CD with a 4-minute window left. And then we can come and do this boss because we don't need Lust for it. And then we can go and do Menagerie, which we would use Lust for. Continue clearing trash, and then do last So As Me with Lust again. That's kind of my original intent, but here we're just kind of like holding W. We're going to come into this room. For some reason, everyone else is still outside, like hanging out. I don't know why. So I'm like in here soloing. I think our Warlock was in here too, but they all finally trail in. Two things here. Defective sorters need to be interrupted when they're opening these cages. If the endangered species or whatever come out, they do a lot of extra damage to you. They'll also bolster or get bolstered, just kind of scary. And then the chickens do stuns if they like run into you. You can avoid the chickens if they do get opened. So just be careful. Also, if you're a DPS or a healer, like any player, don't click on the cage. You can open them, I think, yourself, which is just don't do that because you're going to put your group in danger. And then these post workers do so much tank damage. They have a tank buster and a tank bleed. It's the postage stamp that does a lot of damage. So make sure you're topped off. You're interrupting it with a stun or a roar. And then also you can try to kite them out. Kyrian file does remove the bleed. So if you're playing Kyrian like I am in this key, you have that file as an option, but only use it if you're like really taking damage. Typically if you're at 2 or more stacks. I would say probably 3, but I think it falls off before then. These male elementals actually drop when they die like a haste shield. It benefits both the enemies but also your allies. So if you stand in it, you can get a pretty big haste buff, but when it dies, you don't want the enemy mob standing in it because they're going to just start wrecking your tank or wrecking your group. And then this next pull is something else. There used to be double male elemental and an extra post worker. They actually nerfed this. I didn't really notice this change. Well, I did because there was a lot less mobs, but this pull was always fairly easy. But these post workers, if there's like a lot of them who are bolstered on fortified weeks, can do a lot of damage. So avoid them or try to mitigate this damage at all cost. Make sure you have iron for up, all that nonsense. So what we're doing here is we're trying to separate. We want the post worker to die first. We want to keep the elemental a little bit lower. And then as soon as he's about to die, you pull in the boss. You get this haste buff. You want your mostly casters to be in it. Your melee can be, but you almost have to spread immediately upon pulling because of these the hazardous liquid on the ground. The rule for hazardous liquid is one person should stand in one pool. You don't want more than one because then you get extra debuffs. And you want to essentially keep gaps in the floor or you want to keep the pools off to the side, just soak everything that's in the middle. Group soak the money order, and then the unstable goods comes out. Unstable goods, the first one typically always will line up with like fan mail. So as a bear, I'm going to try to pick up a package, and I'm going to use dash, because this is a time where I can actually use dash comfortably without getting meleeed by the boss. So I'm going to take care of 2 packages really quickly. I'm then going to pull the boss kind of over more towards the chute. Our Warlock needed help, actually, so I roared for him. And then we sit here. I think there's 6 packages. If I'm not mistaken, there's 6. It's a good idea to let your healer ignore this mechanic, unless you obviously need the help. But on high tyrannical keys, especially, the fan mail does so much damage, especially when it overlaps with the liquid. So again, money order, you can group soak unless you have an immune. It is physical damage, so just be careful on that. I don't think you can cloak immune it. I might be wrong about that. If you're like a rogue player, you know a rogue who can do that, or who has done it, let me know. But like things like ice block, bubble, I think warlocks could technically like unending resolve soak. So same thing here. I'm gonna just go into cat form for movement speed. Melee or like DPS need to be careful about going into the hazardous liquid on the floor, because they take a lot of damage. Let the tank do it. And then so in this level of key with this level of DPS, we could pretty much ignore the next unstable goods. So once the bombs spawn, you have about 30 seconds, 25-30 seconds to kill the boss. So if you feel like you're gonna meet the check, or if you have a tracker like time to kill like Uyghur or a tracker, you can utilize that to reference like, okay, we're gonna kill this boss at this rate in 20 seconds. We can just tunnel. So here we call for tunnel. Unstable goods comes out when he's at sub 300k. We're feeling good. And that's pretty much the boss fight. Again, my plan is to eventually get to boss guides on like these bosses, but for now we'll leave them for these videos. So I don't see that we have a lot of CDs rolling, so I want to play this a little safe. So we're gonna actually tag this caster. We're gonna get a range kick on it here from the mage. So what I normally do here is I pull in the peacekeepers that are off to the left hand side that you saw, but we're so ahead of the timer right now. We're so clean. We don't have a lot of CDs rolling, or like at least I don't have Incarn, so I'm not going to tank that much. So we just decide to pull these 3. Peacekeepers, everyone needs to be in melee. The Sparkcasters, kick them on pretty much everything. Their Scintillate, I think it's called, and Hyperlight Salvo need to be kicked. On a week like this, with Quaking, where you're forced to spread, you want to make sure you're stunning. So I got a War Stomp there as we spread for the Quaking to prevent their Quelling Strike, because Quelling Strike does a ton of damage, especially when bolstered. And it'll silence or slash stun your allies, so you don't want that to happen. And then these Phalanx fields, or Phalanx fields, I can't English well. You want to make sure you are just disorienting, stunning, doing something to. They can't be kicked, but knockbacks, any of that stuff works. So bronze are coming in, being clutch, Bronzinas, and then we're gonna go off to our left to get 2 more peacekeepers, kind of keep it nice and easy. You can double up some of these pulls if your group's confident and on non-quaking / bolstering weeks, but this week is really tough for streets. Because like one bolstered peacekeeper will one shot one of your allies, your group members. So again, we're focusing here to get CDR. We're gonna go into the next pull with CDR or cooldowns, or hope to. I'm gonna have Incarn up because the next pull is a little bit bigger, and you want to be really careful. Dodge the Force Slam, but dodge the Force Slam while all staying in melee range of the peacekeepers. I think it's 10 yards if I'm not mistaken. It might be shorter than that, but I think it's 10 yards, which isn't far, by the way. That's a little bit further than where our mage was standing right there. And then we're going to go into the center pull. Center pull is scary because you have to get 2 kicks right away, and you have to be careful of the power kick from the this enforcer. We get double kick, we get everything stacked up. I pop Incarn, and then I'm pointing my back to the wall, so when I get power kicked, I'm getting launched backwards, and I'm not getting launched into like East Asia, where then the mobs will move to me, and then my range are further out, and then they're going to start quelling strike the my allies. I hate these enforcers, dude. They have the smallest fucking hitbox. So like I tried to turn him around there, and then he just moved right behind me. I was like, dude, seriously. Be careful of these enforcers, because their kick can really mess you up, especially if you're getting punted into other packs. And again, it's bolstering weak. we mostly burnt keys earlier, like the 22s and 23s, because stuff like this happened. I got lucky. I got stopped by that pull there because I would have probably pulled those Peacekeepers, which would have then bolstered, and it would have just been a shit show. These Enforcers also soothe them immediately. I think I make a mistake a little bit later where I don't soothe it, and it ends up like almost wiping us. We didn't wipe though, but it was pretty rough. So here, I'm trying to get these Peacekeepers just for efficiency to this other pack, but again, everyone needs to stay in melee the whole time. We're going to get a range kick on the Sparkcaster from the Mage, keep everything stacked here. These Phalanx Fields, we're kicking, we're disorienting or stunning. And then when we have to spread like that, I War Stomp, just so they don't actually rush any of our allies, and we're chilling. I don't know why I'm checking my guild page here. I don't know. Hyperlight Salvo, make sure you're kicking, and then just same thing as before. Now, I've seen a lot of like controversy slash, not controversy, varying opinions about how the RP works in this next area. I thought you just had to run in, but in previous runs, we've just run in to try to trigger RP. You know, she might say a voice line, but then the boss doesn't spawn. So what I've heard and seen is that you have to like go in and out twice. So I think you might be able to do this by having one person go in and then wait a few seconds and then have someone else go in. But I'm not really sure. If you know exactly how this RP starts, let me know in the comments below, because I'd like to know, because it's just inefficient to like stand around waiting. So I'm running back out to try to re-trigger the RP. So after Quaking goes off, I'm going to lock gate back in and re-trigger it. But we're kind of like sitting here like, all right, we have 15 minutes left. That's a ton of time. We have 83% of trash crew. That means like it's like 2 or 3 more pulls, 2 bosses. We want Lust for Soasmi. So it's like, okay, do we keep pulling trash, or do we just, and we're like, all right, screw it, we're just going to do this boss. That was kind of the discussion that we're having right here. And we end up just pulling this boss anyways. Originally, our plan was to trigger the RP and go back out and clear trash. Come back in, lust this boss, and then go back out, clear more trash if we need to, and then go back to Soasmi. But again, we're so far ahead of a timer, it didn't end up mattering. Priority always. Few reasons. It gives you cooldown reduction to keep getting through this boss, but on top of that, it also gives you like things like stampeding roarback quicker and movement speed. So when you have to avoid these types of pools on the ground, it makes it a little bit easier. Also, the healing is good, and the mana refund. If your healer's been like from doing trash pulls, killing will reset your healer's mana, so you don't have to like wait for them to drink before a boss fight. Alcrux is really easy. It's basically just dodge pools. He's gonna then grip people in. You just run out for it, and you can kill him wherever in the room. The reason I say that is because Ashelite, who comes out here, you want him to die in kind of a very specific location. To make the orbs easiest to pick up, you want to kill him in the corner of the room. You can also drag him to the corner of the room, but again, that leaves you less room to spread out for his venting protocol. Not venting protocol. Purification protocol. So you dispel these. I think they do a good bit of damage, so you want to make sure you're topped off. I think Fleshcraft was good. Flagellation protocol, you need to have a purge in your group. You purge, and then once it's purged, you can kick. If not, you just have to take it. It's a tank buster, but you can avoid that damage from the tank buster if you purge kick. The same player who purges should also kick if they can. If not, you can just wait for melee or a class who benefits from kicking. So things like DHs, DKs, who get resources by kicking. Maybe you should take the priority there, but again, that's like such a min-max thing that it doesn't actually matter. If you have a priest in your group, you can actually land mass dispels. If you actually stack with those, they don't do damage when they're dispelled. They only do damage when they expire. So just something to keep in mind. So the reason that the venting protocol you want to put in the corners is because the orbs will bounce off this wall immediately and kind of be funneled into like this tighter axis. And it makes it easier to gather. So we get the mass dispel here. And then I'm trying to get this guy into the corner to die, but we have to be careful with the way that the boss is positioned. So flagellation protocol comes out. We end up not getting a purge here until the very end, and then we don't kick. And then also, last little note is that gluttony, this debuff that absorbs the orbs, it always goes to, it jumps at the closest target. So what's good about this is if you're tracking cooldowns or if your DPS are very coordinated, you can chain cooldowns together. So you can basically give gluttony to someone who has a cooldown, they gather orbs, and then they give gluttony to a different player, and then the player who just did all the orbs can then pop CDs while the other player gathers orbs. And the damage amp from it is pretty insane. Like if you can get to like 20 stacks, you're doing like 100% plus increased damage, which makes CDs like feel really, really good. And they help kill Venza pretty quickly. Chains of Damnation is a like 95% slow. Freedom, Tiger's Lust, Disengage, shifting and cat like into different forms removes the slow. So it's just a couple ways to get out of it. If not, just drag the boss on top of them. Ideally, I would probably be tanking the boss closer to this so we can get it's easier to absorb, but it's not a big deal. Boss dies after just 2.5 minutes. It's a pretty quick boss if you just your TPS are on top of doing damage, I guess. And then here we're gonna go for a pretty aggressive pull. We don't have CDs necessarily. Again, when you're pulling the Enforcer, you want to put your back up against something so you're not getting yeeted into Africa. So I'm going to position myself, well, I tried to position myself by the tree, but I got power kicked pretty quickly. These Quelling Strikes, we started interrupting them to prevent them from going off and killing our allies. We're targeting we're interrupting the shields with Disorient. And then we're trying to back up so we're not getting knocked into like 20, 30 yards away. Now here's where I messed up. Is that the Enforcer is enraged, therefore he's enraging all of the nearby targets as well. You want to soothe it, so I just soothed it now. That's why we all dipped super low there, is because they all had like a 25% damage increase. So anyone with a soothe, target the Enforcer, make sure you're soothing it as soon as it goes off. Outside of that, I think this pack goes down super, super evenly, which is awesome. And then this last mini boss, you can technically go up if you go up to this left-hand side and like you can click on the portal to go up. I haven't tried it yet, but that's what I've been told you can do. So what we're doing here is we're actually pulling this guy all the way back to this like bench table, buyer's table thing, because there's a few reasons why this spot's really good. On Quaking Week, not so much. I got quaked there by our mage, which ended up almost killing me. So for some reason, these mines don't spawn underneath this table or near this table, where there are other spots that they do spawn on. This priest didn't get the memo. I was about to like go off, but we're good. So if you stack behind this table, you basically don't need to move. The lethal force will never actually connect players because there's an object preventing you from actually touching. The shock mines also don't spawn on this table for some reason, so it's pretty efficient now, like to drag him back. Now you can also make the argument like there's downtime dragging it back, but if your range start doing damage from behind the table, it's not that big of a loss. The only problem with this strat is on Quaking Weeks, right? Like we're stacked for Quaking, so then we do have to spread. But this priest for some reason isn't going into range. And the reason I'm like saying that, like he couldn't get the memo, is because the lethal force always pairs a range player with a melee player. Or if there's no melee in your group, it'll pair a range with the tank. Or if there's no range players, it'll pair the melee with a healer. I think that's right. Through some of the testing, we've ran a full melee group in here, and it would always pair with, like, we ran Mistweaver Monk and a full melee comp. So they always got connected. One thing you also have to be careful of too is, so that's how this guy works. That's why we drag him back to the table. This patrol right here, if you don't pull them, there is a chance you'll accidentally tag them. Now, again, they might have fixed this, but we've had instances where when you click the center port and you go up and you're a pet class, your pet will run underneath you as you spiral into the air and could end up pulling this patrol, which we've had happen. Then what ends up happening is they snap into the boss fight. So my group thought we weren't done with percent, so they like weren't coming up. They were like waiting. So like that's why they're all still down there. But we're good. That mini boss is worth it. It's single target, which is a little obnoxious, but doing the table strat makes it basically like it trivializes the fight, and it's worth like 10%. So like I personally think, as someone who like does routes, like creates routes, as I think it's definitely worth pulling one mob if it's worth 10% of your dungeon percent. And then this fight, this fight's obnoxious. I hate this fight. There's times I like it and there's times I hate it. I think this was one of the times where I hated it, just based on how like the ports ended up working. but you essentially target and you stack within quadrants. So the room gets divided down the middle eventually, and in line with these railings, they go like straight across the room. That's how you can reference it. And you essentially always want your group to be in the same quadrant as each other, because when the walls do come up, you obviously don't want to be split. So Shuri comes out, we see that either circle or blue is good, we move through, and then we all want to be in this quadrant because the boss divides at 70, and then again at like 30 or 40. I don't remember exactly the percentages here because I'm still pulling and I honestly don't look at boss health. I get first kick, and then you typically want to hold, but I think our lock ends up kicking out of habit. You want to hold kicks as long as possible there because you just get to milk damage, because once he's unkicked, he teleports around using Quick Blade. He will port to the other side and do divide. He casts his Shuri and then he teleports, just like a lot of obnoxious shit. So you just want to make sure you're trying to milk as much damage as possible. So he does Quick Blade and then he does Shuri. So I think it's 30% that he does divide now that I'm looking at this. We see that circle is clear. We move through circle. Boss will eventually teleport to us. And then we all want to make sure we're in this quadrant because boss is hitting 32%. I don't know when he divides. I'm lost. And then you want to make sure you're in the same quadrant. You can blink over these walls using things like blink and soul shape, but I don't think anything else works. You can obviously like use ports, like a lock can set up his port in a certain quadrant, as long as you're Giga Brain. But again, like that takes a little bit of like you have to have some crazy foresight to set it up. So lock knows that his port's back here, so if the boss ports to this section, he can just whip right through. Shuri spawns in this quadrant. There's a few options. We can go circle and then triangle, and then you wait for blue, or you go back through triangle. You can kind of be a little bit flexible. You just have to pay attention to where the different icons are placed. And then I think we end up just tunneling here. Our warrior dies. This is the only death we had. It was in the last 5% of the boss. So pretty good key. 6 minutes left on the timer. 1 death. And overalls were 17, 15, and 13k. And I only did 7.6. So the pulls were pretty small in here. I was also playing Kyrian. The main reason I played Kyrian in this key is because we don't have an MD and we have a lot of burst damage. So we have a lot of burst from the mage with CDs. We have a lot of burst from like the Destro Lock, which is like infernal spam, Rain of Fire. And then of course warriors just crit all the time. And crits have a higher threat multiplier than just regular normal hits. So when you bring things like DH or warrior to your group, Fury Warrior specifically, you'll often lose threat more often than not. So Kyrian gives me an on-demand burst. It gives DR to the warrior, so even if I don't get threat back, at least he has a 40% DR and that damage is being transferred to me. So all in all, Kyrian's not a bad play. You do a little less damage, but with the nerfs to the tier set, I've kind of accepted that I'm gonna be doing tank damage again and not DPS damage. I'm gonna probably do a separate video talking about the pros and cons of the tank nerf and how the tanks are performing right now in keys, but outside of that, that's the run. I hope you guys learned something. I hope this was insightful. Sorry I'm like a little like hoarse. I'm a little dehydrated and I was up way too late last night. So again, if you guys have any questions or any suggestions to your routes, let me know in the comments below. Our Raider.io profile for this will be linked as well, so you can see our comp, what people were running, what talents I had on, all of that jazz. And then if you want this route for MDI, you can join my Discord. It should be in there. Not MDI, MDT. And you can check out in there and get this route for yourself with hopefully notes and stuff. I think I have to double check if I have this route uploaded. I don't think I do actually. But yeah, hope you guys are staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.